Hi, I'm Melissa Watson, a Palmer Pletsch certified sewing instructor and a designer for the McCall Pattern Company. All Palmer Pletsch patterns feature built-in fit, meaning that there are alteration lines printed on the pattern, as well as a full guide sheet with instructions on how to alter the pattern for your body. Palmer Pletsch has perfected a method known as tissue fitting. If you follow our Palmer Pletsch method and order of tissue fitting, you will be more successful and happier with your finished garment. Today I'm going to be fitting M6608 on Jennifer, and it's a long mitered skirt down the middle on the bias. So let's get started. So I'm here with Jennifer from Workroom Social, and we're going to be fitting my pattern M6608 on her. It's a skirt pattern. We're doing the mitered version with the mitering down the center front. And the first thing that you need to do to get a successful fitting garment is get the right size. So I've started with putting an elastic band around Jennifer's waist so we know where she's going to be wearing the top of her skirt. She wants it a little higher waisted. So this is where we're putting the waistband. And the two measurements that you're going to need to take for your skirt is a waist measurement and a hip measurement. But the real important measurement is the hip measurement, because that's the size pattern that we're going to cut. She has a large variance between her waist and her hip, so we want to fit to her hip and then we can take it in at the waist. So I'm going to take a skin measurement of the widest part of her hip, which meaning you want to pull really snug around that hip measurement. So she's about a 37 3/4, and that is going to be a size 12. So I'm going to go get your pattern cut out and prepared to fit, and I'll meet you back here. So the supplies that I'm going to need today to fit and alter your pattern are straight pins, some paper scissors, some French curves, a clear ruler, 1/2 inch Scotch tape. I have two different widths of elastic here. I'm going to use different ones depending on the width of the waistband. A tape measure, two different color of ink pens, and tailor chalk. So to get the pattern ready to fit, I have pressed it with a dry iron, and I've cut outside the cutting line of Jennifer's size. Today she is a 12, and so I have this all cut out and pressed, and now I need to mark the stitching line for the pattern. We have a 5/8 inch stitching line. This helps for accuracy in pinning the pattern pieces together to make sure that you're taking the right amount of seam allowance. And as well as when you do alterations and you can take in the pattern, pin it, put pins in different places, you can see where your original stitching line was, so it's easier to make alterations from that. So you just want to mark all the way around the center back, center front, and the waistband. And now for the skirt, we're ready to pin it together. So I'm going to start with the darts, and you want to make sure to angle your pins down so they don't poke your subject, and make sure to pin below the stitching line. Don't pin up through the seam allowance at the top. So just start at the stitching line and pin down. And I have my front dart pinned already. And now for the side seam, also angle your pins down. And I'm going to finish pinning this side seam, and then we're ready to go try it on Jennifer. So skirts are the easiest thing to fit because there's so little seams. What we're going to do is we're going to start at Jennifer's center front, and I'm going to pin the center front of the pattern to her center front. And I also have pinned the center back of the pattern to her center back. And the first thing I'm going to look at here is the dart. I can tell that Jennifer doesn't really need a dart. Darts point to roundness or curves in the body, and she's pretty flat in the front. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove this front dart, and we'll just move this excess tissue towards the side seam, and it'll just eliminate the dart. Now, I can also tell when trying on this pattern on Jennifer, sorry, I'll have you move actually this way again, that we have a lot of extra tissue here. And even though we did her measurement, this is why it's very important to tissue fit, is because the pattern has 5 inches of ease at the hip area. So it's obviously supposed to be a looser pattern because it is a woven, and you know, we're putting a center back zipper in, but still there's a lot of ease here, even in her widest part in her hip area. And as I mentioned before, we knew that we were gonna have to take a lot out of the side seam up at the waist area because she is so much smaller here. So what I'm gonna do is just make sure that I get the front flat and straight, and I'm going to take out the pins at the side seam, take out the first couple pins, and now I'm going to actually fit the side seam to Jennifer's side seam starting at the waist. And I'll just turn you this way a little bit more, thanks. And this is just going to make sure that, especially since we removed the dart and are taking in the side seam so much, I just want to make sure that her side seam is going to be at her side where it should be. And I don't want to fit it too snugly to her body because it is, again, a woven, and you want a little bit of ease, but just not this much. Great, and then I'm just gradually pinning it out to the original stitching line, because as it is an A-line skirt, we do like this shape right here. But as you can see, I'll turn you towards the back. We've pinned it in quite a bit, and it's almost skimming her body with a little bit of ease. And then on the back, I am going to leave in the dart, and it's coming to her center back. So this looks good. And now the next thing I'm going to do is look at the length of the skirt. I know because we spoke before that she does want it to be a floor-length skirt, and the hem here is 1 1/4 inch. So I think we should be okay with the length. Because she is long-waisted, so she does need this length up here. And now I'm going to fit the waistband on you, so I can turn you back towards the front. And just to make it easier, I'm just going to take off your skirt. Also, the elastic is great because you can pin the pattern to it. So the last thing that we're going to do is fit the waistband, and I am once again going to put it at your center front and center back. And as we saw in this skirt, I knew that the waistband was going to be really big. So what we're going to do is, instead of just taking it all out of the side seam, because it's a contour waistband, you want to tuck it at various places around the waistband so you keep that nice curve and it's the same shape as Jennifer's body. So I'm just going to take little tucks around. And put pins, and I'll make it perfect at the table. Just pin it so it's laying flat, and there's a little bit in the back that I need to do. Just turn you around. Great. Perfect. And now the waistband is laying nice and flat, and the side seam is at her side seam. So we are good to go and alter the pattern. I'll see you at the alteration table. So now I've fit Jennifer in her pattern and we're ready to do the alterations. I'm gonna start with the side seam, as we took so much off, and as you can see, I scooted the side seam towards the back slightly because I took much more off the front than I took off the back, and that just has to do with her shape. It's almost like you're draping on the person when you're tissue fitting them. So now I'm gonna mark the new seam line where the pins are. As you can see, this pattern had a lot of ease because we took off so much. We didn't need that much ease on Jennifer. I'll just flip it, and it looks like they did, but I'll just mark in case because it's not going to be the same on the front as it is on the back. Great. Now I can take my pins out, and I'm going to draw my new stitching line here. I'll use my French curve to mimic the shape of her side. So just try and match up the markings, and that's the shape that you're gonna draw on your French curve. It's a very slight curve, but this ruler is made to mimic the curve of your body. So yeah, they are matching up. So I'm just gonna redraw this new stitching line. And you know, it may not be perfect, but that's fine because no body is the same. No body is perfect. And now I'm going to add seam allowance back to this new stitching line. The 5/8 here. All right. And now I'm going to do that to the front, because again, I took a lot more off the front than I took off the back. And true up these markings with the French curve first. And remember, we left the dart out for Jennifer's, the front dart, because she's so flat in the front. So just to remind myself, I'm just going to put an X through it. Great. And now I'm going to trim off the excess of the front and the back, and I'm going to move on to my waistband. So as you remember, for the waistband, this is a contour band, and we had to take some tucks throughout the front and back of the bands. So I'm going to mark the pin where I took that tuck, that dart, in Jennifer's waistband on one side of the pin, and I'm going to flip that tuck over and mark on the other side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pin out and just flatten it, and I see exactly where my two marks were to bring together. So now I'm just going to bring those marks together once again and fold it over to one side, and I'll put a pin down at the bottom of the waistband, and then we're going to smooth it up to nothing, just like a dart at the top, and I'll pin that down. So now I'm ready to tape this dart out of the waistband. So the last thing we're going to do is true up. You can see this little point right here that we have. So I'm just going to take my curve, my French curve, and I'm going to draw where I'm going to clip that part off. We just needs to be a smooth curve at the top of the waistband. And now I can just cut, just need to turn this around, and I'll just cut this little edge off. And sometimes you'll get places that you need to true up at the bottom of the waistband, and sometimes you'll get it at the top. Wherever you're seeing a weird edge, just true it up so you have a nice, smooth, finished edge there. All right, and now that everything, I'm gonna finish the rest of the waistband, and I'll show you guys the finished altered pattern in just a minute. So before I go and cut out fabric, I want to show you what the finished altered pattern looks like. You can really see how dramatically the side seam has come in and how much we've cut off of the upper area of the side seam towards her waist on both the front and the back. And you can especially see it in the waistband. That original curve that the contour waistband had, it's way less dramatic now, and that's okay. It's the shape of Jennifer's waist, and this is how you want it to be. So as I'm taking these tucks, it's really tailoring it to her shape rather than what a standard waistband would be. And this will give her a better fit in the end. So now we're ready to go cut out in fabric. So we have tissue fitted the pattern, altered the pattern, and now cut out the fabric. I've sewn the center front and center back seam, and now we're gonna fit the fabric on Jennifer. And hopefully at this point, you should have a garment that's pretty close to perfect. I do notice that I want to take in a little bit more at the side seam, which is something that we anticipated. So just to make sure that it's snug, because fabric does grow, and this is on the bias, so it definitely is going to grow a little bit. So I'm just moving a few pins right here on her side seam just to make sure that it has enough ease, because I can pull it, but that it is snug enough to her body. And I'll do the other side. Great. And everything else is looking really good on the skirt. I like the way it's looking. I will, at this point, just pin up her hem to the length that you want it. You said you want it floor length, so I'll just pin it up in a minute, and we'll take a look at the waistband. This is the last thing. And you'll just put it where you want. Perfect. And now you can turn around, and I'm just going to pin the waistband. And remember, we do have seam allowance on this waistband, so make sure that it's the top of the waistband is basically where you want it at the top of your waist. And I'm just going to pin it onto you, and that's the side seams are coming to the side seams. That's great. And I'll just, if there's any extra fabric, I'll just pin it in to make sure that they are even. And that looks great. And now we're ready to go sew up her finished skirt, and then we'll take a look at the finished product. So here we have Jennifer's finished skirt. It's looking really great. I love the drape and of the bias cut fabric, and it's just looking really good. The fit turned out great. I want to remind you guys that every time you make your skirt, always fabric fit, because you're going to be using different fabric every time and it will act differently. Also, many people are different from their right and their left sides, as we saw on Jennifer, and it's just important to remember to do that. Thanks for watching, and thanks so much for being a great model. Be sure to check out the rest of the Learn to Fit video series from McCall's. We have some great tips on other patterns in there.